paralyzed millionaire was humiliated on a blind date, but he fell in love with the waitress who defended him. And what she found out later left her speechless. Before the story starts, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story, everyone. Edward Smith watched the door of the Bella Vista restaurant. His hands were sweating, and he felt ridiculous for being so nervous. After all, he was 32 years old and had closed million-dollar deals without blinking. But a blind date? That was unknown territory. His mother, Rosalind, had insisted so much that he finally gave in. "Son, you need to get out of that office. Estella is beautiful, successful, and perfect for you," she had said with that convincing smile. Edward rolled his eyes at the memory. His mother always thought someone was perfect for him. The restaurant was busy that Friday night. The sound of lively conversations and silverware mixed with the soft jazz music playing in the background. Edward sat at a corner table near the window, where he could see the bright lights of Boston. He sipped his glass of cold water and looked at his watch. Estella was 15 minutes late. Typical. He took a deep breath and tried to relax, but the wheelchair under him felt like it weighed a ton at that moment. 3 years had passed since the accident, but dates were still an emotional challenge. The restaurant door opened, and a tall woman with perfectly styled blonde hair walked in with firm steps. She wore a tight red dress and high heels that echoed on the wooden floor. Her eyes scanned the room until they found Edward. She smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. Estella walked to the table with confidence, her designer purse swinging on her arm. Edward straightened up and gave a polite smile. "Edward?" she asked, her voice melodic. "Yes, you must be Estella. It's a pleasure to meet you," he said, extending his hand. She shook his hand quickly, almost unwillingly, and pulled out the chair to sit. That was when her eyes dropped and noticed the wheelchair. Her face changed instantly. The smile disappeared, replaced by an expression of shock and then thinly disguised disdain. You're in a wheelchair?" Estella said, as if it were the worst thing in the world. Edward felt his stomach sink. "Yes, I use a wheelchair. I thought my mother had mentioned." "Mentioned?" Estella let out a dry, cruel laugh. "No, she definitely didn't mention that you were like this." The word "this" left her mouth like an insult. Edward clenched his fists under the table, trying to stay composed. "Look, I can't believe I came all the way here to waste my time," Estella went on, grabbing her phone from her purse and scrolling through it with disinterest. "Really, your mother should have been honest. I have a reputation to protect, you know? I can't be seen with, well, you understand." "Understand what, exactly?" Edward asked, his voice tense. "That I deserve someone complete, Edward. Someone who can really keep up with me. Parties, trips, walks on the beach. Do you think I'm going to spend my life pushing a wheelchair?" She rolled her eyes and shook her head. "This is so embarrassing." Every word was a stab. Edward felt his face heat with humiliation. He wanted to respond, to put that woman in her place, but the words got stuck in his throat. He looked around and noticed some people at nearby tables beginning to pay attention to the raised voices. "You know what's worse? I canceled an important dinner to come here. A total waste of my time." Estella continued, without any shame. "You should put that on your profile like a warning. It saves people time." Before Edward could respond, a female voice cut through the air like a sharp blade. "Sorry to interrupt this lovely moment, but have you decided what you'll order? Or is the lady already on her way out?" Edward turned his head and saw a waitress standing beside the table, notepad in hand, and an expression that didn't hide her indignation. She had brown hair tied in a messy ponytail, bright green eyes, and an apron stained with tomato sauce. Estella looked at the waitress with disdain. "I'm busy here, miss. You can come back later." "Actually, I don't think I can," the waitress replied, placing a hand on her hip. Her name tag said Livia. "Because I heard everything you said, and I need to tell you something." "Excuse me?" Estella raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. "You heard me. Look, I've worked here for 3 years and I've seen a lot of rude people, but you win the award for the most horrible person of the night. Congratulations." Edward widened his eyes. Some people at the surrounding tables began to watch. Curious, Estella turned bright red with anger. "How dare you?" "How I dare? How do you dare?" Livia cut in, her voice firm but not shouting. This man had the decency to leave his home, get ready, come here and give you a chance. And you? You judge him for being in a wheelchair? Really? That's none of your business. Estella raised her voice. It became my business when you started humiliating a customer in my section, Livia shot back. Let me explain something to you, dear. That wheelchair right there? It doesn't define who he is, but you know what defines you? That rotten attitude of yours. And guess what? That's much worse than any wheelchair. Edward was speechless. No one had ever defended him like that. Estella stood up abruptly, almost knocking the chair over. I'm not staying here to listen to this from a simple waitress. Great, the door is right there. Livia pointed to the exit with a sweet, fake smile. And don't forget to leave your humanity on the way out. Oh, wait, you didn't bring any. Estella huffed, grabbed her purse tightly, and marched out, her high heels hitting the floor in angry clicks. A few people in the restaurant clapped quietly. Livia let out a sigh and looked at Edward, who was still processing everything. She gave him a genuine smile and shrugged. Sorry about that. I couldn't hold back, she said, sounding softer now. Some people need to hear a few truths, you know? Edward finally managed to speak. I thank you. You didn't have to do that. Of course I did. That woman was being awful. No one deserves to be treated like that. Livia shook her head, still upset. Look, dinner is on the house today. It's the least I can do after that whole circus. No, please. I don't want to cause any trouble for you. Trouble? The trouble walked out in high heels a minute ago, Livia laughed. Now tell me, what would you like to eat? And don't give me that I lost my appetite line. After dealing with people like that, we need good food. I recommend the cheese ravioli. It's like a hug for your stomach. Edward couldn't hold back a smile, the first real smile of the night. Cheese ravioli sounds perfect. Great choice. And to drink? Red wine? Coming right up. Livia wrote it down and winked at him. And relax, okay? Not every woman is like that creature who walked out. There are good people out there. She walked away to take the order to the kitchen, leaving Edward alone with his thoughts. He looked toward the door where Estella had left, then toward the path Livia had taken. For the first time in a long time, Edward felt something different in his chest. It wasn't self-pity or anger. It was something light, almost like hope. And all because of a waitress with an apron stained with sauce who wasn't afraid to say what she thought. He sighed and leaned back in his chair, feeling his shoulders loosen. Maybe the night wasn't a complete disaster after all. Livia came back from the kitchen balancing a basket of warm bread and butter. She placed everything on Edward's table with a wide smile. While the ravioli is getting ready, nibble on this. The bread is homemade and addictive. Seriously. Once I ate 5 in a row and almost couldn't zip my pants, she said with a little laugh. Edward picked up a piece of bread still steaming. Thank you. And thank you again for earlier. Relax, that was free therapy for me. I love putting arrogant people in their place, Livia winked. Besides, you look like a lost puppy in the rain. I had to do something. He almost choked on the bread. A lost puppy? Yes, that deep, sad look, you know? But now you're better. Look, you even smiled, she pointed at him enthusiastically. Edward shook his head, still smiling. There was something refreshing about her honesty. She had no filter, but she also had no cruelty. Do you always say exactly what you think? Always. My grandmother used to say I was born without a mute button. She tried to teach me to be more delicate, but I think the instruction manual came in Chinese. Livia laughed loudly. But hey, at least I'm honest, right? That's true, Edward agreed, feeling more relaxed by the minute. Well, I'll let you enjoy the bread. If you need anything, just wave. And if another Estella shows up, I have more ammunition ready. She made a funny face before walking away. Edward ate his dinner in peace, watching Livia work. She served the tables with contagious energy, making jokes with customers and getting laughs wherever she went. There was a lightness in her that completely contrasted with the weight he had carried for 3 years. When he finished eating, Livia brought the check. Edward reached for his wallet, but she placed her hand over his. I said it was on the house, remember? Are you going to get in trouble for this? Let me worry about that. You just need to come back another day and order a very expensive dessert to make up for it. She gave that mischievous smile again. Edward put his wallet away, but left a $50 bill on the table as a tip. Livia's eyes widened. Is that a tip, or are you trying to buy the restaurant? It's a proper thank you, he replied, already pushing his chair back. You're crazy, you know that? But you're a nice kind of crazy. Livia took the bill and slipped it into her apron. Drive safely, okay? I promise. Good night, Livia. Good night, Edward. He left the restaurant feeling lighter than when he had arrived. All the way home, he couldn't get Livia out of his mind. Her relaxed way of talking, her genuine laugh, those green eyes full of life. It felt like she had turned on a light in a room that had been dark for far too long. The next morning, Edward woke up with sunlight coming through his bedroom window. He stretched and moved into his wheelchair with the ease of someone who did that every day. He showered, got dressed, and went to the kitchen to make coffee. While drinking the hot coffee, he picked up his phone and opened the browser. He typed Bella Vista Restaurant, Boston, and found the address. He looked at the clock. 10 in the morning. Too early for lunch, but maybe he could stop by and have a coffee. He shook his head. What a ridiculous idea, he murmured to himself. But Livia's smiling face wouldn't leave his thoughts. At 2 in the afternoon, Edward parked his adapted car in front of Bella Vista. He had spent the entire morning trying to convince himself he shouldn't go, but there he was anyway. He walked into the restaurant and looked for Livia. She was writing down orders at a table in the back, her hair in the same messy ponytail as the day before. When she turned and saw him, her face lit up. Look who came back, the abandoned puppy, she shouted across the room, making some customers look over. Edward felt his face warm. You're not going to stop calling me that, are you? Never. Livia finished writing the order and walked over to him. But really, you came back. I thought it would take you at least a week. I was passing by and thought I'd stop for a coffee, he lied without hesitation. Right? Passing by completely at random with no specific reason at all, she said with a playful smile that showed she didn't believe him one bit. Come on, sit at the same table as yesterday. I'll bring you the best coffee you've ever had. Edward went to the table and waited. Livia came back minutes later with a steaming cup and a generous slice of apple pie. I didn't order pie, he said. I know, but you look like someone who needs sugar. And before you complain, this one is on the house too. Consider it an official apology from the establishment for the disaster your date was yesterday. You might get fired if you keep giving away free food, Edward warned. Oh, my manager loves me. I'm the waitress who sells the most here. I have my privileges. She sat down in the chair across from him without asking. So, tell me, how did you sleep after that traumatic experience? Better than I expected, honestly. Good, because I kept thinking you would go home and feel depressed. Then I would feel bad for not throwing cold water on that awful woman. Edward laughed out loud. You are something else, you know that? I hear that a lot. I never know if it's a compliment or a complaint, but I'll take it as a compliment. Livia rested her chin on her hand. So, are you going to try another blind date? Or is your mother finally going to leave you alone? My mother will never leave me alone. She is always setting up dates for me. Mothers are like that. Mine keeps telling me I need to find a husband before I get too old. I'm 26. I'm not exactly close to old age. 26? You look younger. Thank you. I think it's because I laugh a lot. They say laughing keeps you young. If that's true, I'll die looking like a teenager. She let out that contagious laugh again. They talked for another 20 minutes. Livia told funny stories about difficult customers she had served, and Edward found himself laughing more than he had in years. There was something magnetic about her, an energy that pulled him out of the shell he had been hiding in. When Livia needed to get back to work, Edward gathered his courage. Livia, can I ask you a question? Of course. I take many shots and miss most of them, but I answer everything. Would you like to have ice cream with me after your shift? She blinked, surprised. Ice cream? Like a date? It doesn't have to be a date if you don't want it to be. It can just be two friends having ice cream, he said quickly, feeling foolish. Livia tilted her head, thinking for a moment. Then she smiled. You know what? I'd love to. My shift ends at 7. There's an amazing ice cream shop 3 blocks from here. Sweet Dreams. I know the place. Should I meet you there at 7:30? Deal. But promise me one thing. What? Don't get nervous, okay? I don't bite. Well, I don't bite hard. She winked and walked away laughing. Edward stayed there for a few more minutes, finishing his coffee and pie. He couldn't stop smiling. It had been so long since the last time he felt like this. Nervous in a good way, hopeful. When he left the restaurant, the sun was shining brighter in the sky. Boston looked like a different city, more colorful, more alive. And all because of a funny waitress who wasn't afraid to be herself. At 7:20 in the evening, Edward was already parked in front of Sweet Dreams. He checked the time on his phone for the 5th time in 2 minutes. He was as nervous as a teenager on a first date. At 7:35, Livia came running down the sidewalk, still wearing her restaurant uniform. She was out of breath when she reached him. "Sorry I'm late. A customer decided to order dessert 5 minutes before I could leave, and I couldn't say no because his tip is always good and I need the money and—" "Breathe," Edward interrupted, laughing. She stopped and took a deep breath. "Okay." I breathed. "Now let's get ice cream before I die wanting it." They walked into the ice cream shop and were greeted by the sweet smell of fresh cones and the cold air conditioning. The place was small and cozy, with colorful tables and a display full of tempting flavors. Livia ran to the counter like a child in a toy store. "Look, they have the cookie and caramel flavor. That's my absolute favorite in the whole world." "You seem excited," Edward said, walking up to the counter. "Excited? I'm thrilled. Ice cream is my religion. If there were an ice cream church, I'd be the head nun." She pressed her face against the display glass. "Or maybe the Mother Superior? I don't know how nun hierarchy works." The server, a young man with spiky hair, smiled at her. "Do you know what you'd like? 2 scoops of cookie and caramel, please, and put that chocolate topping on top. And sprinkles. And marshmallow. Actually, put everything you have." Edward laughed. "You're going to eat all that?" "I am. And if I can't finish, I'll take it home and eat it in the middle of the night while watching some bad show on TV. It's my therapy," Livia said, turning to him. "And you? What are you getting?" "Plain chocolate," he replied. "Plain chocolate? Seriously? With all these wonderful flavors and you pick the most basic one?" "I like chocolate," Edward said with a shrug. "You're boring, you know that? But fine, I accept you the way you are." She tapped him on the shoulder like she was comforting a child. They got their ice creams and sat at a little table by the window. Livia attacked her dessert with enthusiasm, getting chocolate on her nose without noticing. "You have a little chocolate here," Edward said, pointing to his own nose. "Where?" She wiped the wrong side. "No, on the other side." Livia wiped again, still in the wrong spot. "Now?" "Let me do it," Edward said, picking up a napkin and gently wiping her nose. "Thanks. I'm a little clumsy with food. Once I went to a fancy dinner and had tomato sauce on my forehead the whole night. No one told me. When I got home and looked in the mirror, I almost fainted." Edward shook his head, laughing. "How did you even get sauce on your forehead?" "No idea, but I did. I have a special talent for making a mess," she said, licking her spoon with delight. "So, tell me more about you. What do you do besides going on awful blind dates?" He hesitated for a moment. "I work in business. I have a consulting company." "Wow, fancy. I bet you wear a suit every day and have important meetings with important people." "More or less," Edward admitted. "It must be interesting. Very different from writing down burger orders all day," Livia said, taking another spoonful. "But I'm not complaining. I like what I do. People are funny, you know? Every customer is a different story." "And you? Did you always want to be a waitress?" Livia paused. Her smile faded a little, but didn't disappear completely. "Actually, I was in college for physical therapy, but I had to stop." "Why?" She stirred her ice cream, thoughtful. "Life happened, you know. Sometimes plans change, and we have to adjust." Edward sensed there was more to the story, but he didn't want to pressure her. "Physical therapy is an interesting field." "Yes, I've always liked help people, and I think it's fascinating how the human body works, how we can recover from injuries and go back to doing things that once seemed impossible." She smiled again. "But hey, who knows? Maybe one day I'll go back to school, right?" "Definitely," Edward agreed. "And you? How did you end up in a wheelchair? If you don't want to talk about it, that's fine. I know it's personal." He swallowed hard. He didn't like talking about it, but there was something about Livia that made him want to open up. "It was a car accident." 3 years ago. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she said, genuinely touched. "It must have been hard." "It was," Edward agreed, his voice growing softer. He could feel that familiar weight of sadness rising in his chest. Livia noticed the change in the mood and quickly shifted the subject. "You know what helps when we're sad? Ice cream. And bad jokes. Let me tell you one. Why did the Scarecrow win an award?" Edward blinked, confused by the sudden change. "I don't know. Because he was outstanding in his field." She burst into loud laughter at her own joke. It was so bad that Edward couldn't help but laugh too. "That was terrible. I know, the best jokes are the awful ones. I have 1,000,000 of them saved. My son loves them," she said casually, going back to her ice cream. "Your son?" Edward felt like he had been punched in the stomach. "Oh, I hadn't mentioned it? I have a son, Peter. He's 4 years old and he's the funniest thing that ever happened in my life." Her face lit up as she talked about the boy. Edward tried to process the information. Livia had a son. Of course she did. A beautiful, funny, amazing woman like her would obviously already have a life of her own. "Are you married?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "No. Peter's father isn't in our lives. He left when he found out I was pregnant, but it's okay. We don't need him. Peter and I are a team," she said with conviction. "He's with my neighbor right now. Mrs. Ad Thompson watches him while I work. She's adorable and makes amazing cookies." "It must be hard raising a child on your own," Edward commented. "It is and it isn't. I mean, it's hard financially. I have to pay for college, rent, food, Mrs. Thompson, everything. That's why I took a break from school. But emotionally, Peter makes everything worth it. That boy comes up with things that make me laugh until I cry. He sounds special. He really is. Last week he asked me if cows also drink milk. I spent 10 minutes trying to explain that cows produce milk, but he kept insisting they needed to drink milk to get strong." Livia laughed at the memory. Kids have their own logic. They kept talking for another hour. Livia told hilarious stories about Peter, about crazy customers at the restaurant, about her messy childhood. Edward found himself laughing more than he had in years, feeling light and happy. When they left the ice cream shop, it was almost 9 at night. The street was lit by the lampposts, and there was a gentle breeze in the air. "Thank you for the ice cream," Livia said, adjusting her bag on her shoulder. "It was much more fun than I expected." "More fun? You were expecting it to be boring?" "No. I mean, yes. I don't know," she laughed, embarrassed. "It's just been a while since I've gone out like this, you know, just to talk and have ice cream. It felt good." "For me too," Edward said sincerely. They stood there for a moment, just looking at each other. Then Livia broke the silence. "Well, I need to go get Peter. Mrs. Thompson gets upset if I'm too late." "Of course. Can I give you a ride?" "No need. I live close by. I'll just walk." "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. But thank you for the offer." She started walking backwards. "And hey, if you want ice cream another day, you know where to find me." "I'll remember that. Bye, Edward." "Bye, Livia." She turned and walked down the sidewalk, waving one last time before turning the corner. Edward stayed there for a few more minutes, just smiling like a fool. For the first time in 3 years, he felt truly alive, and all because of a clumsy waitress who loved ice cream with every topping possible and had a 4-year-old son who asked philosophical questions about cows. Edward got back in his car and drove home with a lighter heart. He didn't know exactly what was happening, but he knew he wanted to see Livia again, and again, and again after that. The next morning, Livia arrived at the Bella Vista restaurant 15 minutes late. She rushed to the locker room, changed her clothes in record time, and tied on her apron while practically flying toward the dining area. "Good morning, Livia. What time do you call this?" Tony, the manager, shouted from behind the counter. "Good morning, Tony. Sorry. Peter decided today was the day to be an artist and painted the living room wall with toothpaste. I had to clean it before leaving," she explained, grabbing the order pad. "Toothpaste?" "Yes, he said he was making a mural. When I asked why he didn't use paper, he said paper was too small for his artistic vision. 4 years old and already has artistic vision." Livia laughed, shaking her head. Tony sighed, but he couldn't hide a smile. "Just don't be late again." "I'll try, I promise." Livia started serving the tables with her usual energy. She was writing down a pancake order when she saw Edward walking through the door. Her heart jumped a little, which she pretended not to feel. He looked around for her and smiled when he found her. Livia finished writing the order and went to him. 2 days in a row? You're becoming a VIP customer, she said, trying to sound casual. The coffee here is very good, Edward replied, but the way he looked at her made it clear it wasn't just about the coffee. Right. It's definitely about the coffee and not any other specific reason. Livia guided him to an empty table. The usual? Please. She returned minutes later with steaming coffee and toast. Here you go. Hot coffee and crispy toast. Anything else? Actually, yes, Edward took a deep breath. I was thinking, would you like to have lunch with me today, when your shift ends? Livia bit her lip, thinking. I would love to, but I need to pick up Peter at Mrs. Thompson's house. She has physical therapy at 3. We can have lunch earlier then. What time do you get off? 12:30. Perfect. I know a great place nearby. I promise I'll get you home in time to pick up Peter. Livia hesitated for just a second before smiling. Okay, but if I'm late, you'll have to explain to Mrs. Thompson why she missed physical therapy. Deal, Edward smiled back. The rest of the morning flew by. Livia was so distracted she almost wrote down an ice cream order instead of an omelet and served orange juice to a customer who had asked for coffee. When 12:30 finally arrived, she changed quickly and found Edward waiting outside the restaurant. Ready? He asked. Ready. Where are we going? It's a surprise. They walked to a small French bistro 2 blocks from Bella Vista. The place was charming, with wooden tables and flowers in every corner. Wow, this is fancy, Livia exclaimed as she walked in. I hope they accept people who work with ketchup-stained aprons. You're not wearing an apron, Edward pointed out. Oh, right. Sometimes I forget I'm not working, she laughed. They sat, and a well-dressed waiter brought the menus. Livia opened hers and widened her eyes at the prices. Edward, this is really expensive. A salad costs $20. Don't worry about it. Choose whatever you want. But Livia, I invited you. Let me take care of the bill, okay? She sighed but ended up agreeing. She ordered a chicken sandwich with fries, and Edward ordered grilled salmon. So, Livia began, sipping cold water, do you usually bring all the waitresses who defend you to expensive lunches? Only the special ones, he replied without thinking, then turned red once he realized what he had said. Livia smiled but looked away, embarrassed too. Thank you for yesterday. The ice cream was delicious. I'm the one who should thank you for the company. Really? Even after finding out I have a 4-year-old son who paints walls with toothpaste? Especially after that, Edward said sincerely. Peter seems amazing. He is. Yesterday when I got home he was using the pots as drums. Mrs. Thompson said he did that for an hour. My neighbor is a saint for putting up with it. Do you pay her to watch him? Yes. Not much, because she's already retired and likes having company, but every little bit I manage to save goes to that and basic bills. That's why I left college. I couldn't pay for both. Edward stayed quiet for a moment. Do you want to go back to studying? One day, I hope so. When Peter is older and I can save enough. But for now, it's fine. Working at Bella Vista isn't my life dream, but it pays the bills and still gives me time to be with my son. That's what matters. The food arrived, and they ate while talking about random things. Livia told more funny stories about Peter, and Edward found himself smiling the whole time. When they finished, Edward paid the bill and they left the restaurant. Livia checked the time. I have 40 minutes left. Want to walk a bit? Sure. They walked down the sidewalk side by side. Livia pointed to the stores and told stories about each one. That's where Peter had a meltdown, because I didn't let him buy 12 chocolate bars. And in that clothing store, one time I tried on a dress inside out and only noticed when the saleswoman started laughing. Edward laughed at every story. There was something contagious about the way Livia saw the world, always finding humor in the simplest situations. After walking for a while, Edward stopped in front of a toy store. Can I ask you a kind of strange question? You can. I'm a specialist in strange questions. Do you think Peter would like to visit my office someday? I have some tech gadgets that kids usually find interesting. Nothing big, just a few computer things and stuff. Livia tilted her head, surprised. Really? You want to meet Peter? I do. If you don't mind, of course. She stayed quiet for so long that Edward started thinking he had said something wrong. Then she smiled. that genuine smile that lit up her whole face. Peter would love that. He loves technology. He's always messing with my phone. Then it's a plan. How about Saturday? Saturday is perfect. I don't work on Saturdays. They kept walking until they reached Livia's building, a simple 3-story place. Edward parked the car out front. "Thank you for lunch," Livia said, already with her hand on the door handle. "It was really nice. It was for me, too." She opened the door but hesitated before getting out. "Edward? Yes? Thank you for not minding about Peter. A lot of people act strange when they find out I have a son. Peter is part of who you are, and I like who you are, a lot." Livia felt her heart race. "I like who you are, too." They looked at each other for a moment that felt like it lasted forever. Then Livia blinked and stepped out of the car quickly. "See you Saturday, then. Send me the address." "I'll send it." She went inside the building waving, and Edward stayed there for a few minutes, just smiling. He had a plan for Saturday, with Livia and Peter. Somehow, that made him happier than any business meeting ever had. As he drove home, Edward realized he was humming along with the song on the radio. It had been years since he hummed, years since he felt like this, light and hopeful. And it all started with a waitress who defended a stranger in a restaurant. Funny how life worked sometimes. The next day, Livia was cleaning a table when Tony called her to the office. Her heart tightened. Tony never called anyone to the office unless it was something serious. She dropped the cloth and walked to the small room in the back of the restaurant. Tony was sitting behind the desk, and next to him was Estella, the woman who had humiliated Edward. "Livia, sit," Tony said, his voice serious. "What's going on?" Livia asked, looking from Tony to Estella. "Miss Rodriguez here came to file a complaint about you," Tony explained. Estella crossed her arms, a poisonous smile on her lips. "I was extremely mistreated by this waitress last Friday. She was rude, disrespectful, and humiliated me in front of other customers." "I mistreated you?" Livia almost shouted. "You were the one humiliating a customer." "That's a lie. I was just having a private conversation, and she barged in a very rude way," Estella said, pretending to be offended. "Tony, you can't believe her. She was being awful to Edward just because he's in a wheelchair." "I never said anything about a wheelchair. She made that up to defend herself," Estella snapped. Tony rubbed his face with both hands. "Livia, Miss Rodriguez is the daughter of one of our investors. She's demanding that I take action." "What kind of action?" Livia felt her stomach drop. "I'm letting you go, Livia. I'm sorry, but I don't have a choice." The world stopped. Livia felt like she had been punched. "Tony, you can't do this. I need this job. I have a son to raise." "I know, and I'm really sorry, but my hands are tied," Tony said, avoiding her eyes. "This isn't fair. I was only defending a customer who was being mistreated." Estella stood up, satisfied. "Well, it seems justice was served. I hope this is a lesson." Livia looked at her with tears in her eyes. "You are a horrible person. And you are unemployed. Have a good day," Estella said as she walked out with firm steps. Tony sighed. "Livia, you can get your things. I'll pay you the rest of the month as compensation." She couldn't respond. She just nodded, grabbed her things from the locker, and left through the back door. She didn't want the other employees to see her crying. She walked to the nearest bus stop and sat on the bench, letting the tears fall freely. How was she going to pay the bills now? How would she pay Mrs. Thompson? And the college she dreamed of going back to? Everything felt like it was falling apart. She stayed there for almost an hour, just crying and trying to process what had happened. When she finally calmed down enough, she picked up her phone and called Mrs. Thompson. "Hello? Mrs. Thompson, it's Livia. Something happened. Can I pick up Peter earlier today?" "Of course, dear. Is everything all right?" "It will be," Livia lied. "Thank you." She hung up and started walking home. Every step felt heavier than the last. When she reached Mrs. Thompson's apartment, she forced a smile. Peter ran to hug her. "Mom, you came early." "I did, my love. Ready to go home?" "Let's go. Mrs. Thompson made cookies today, and I ate 3. 3? Wow, you're going to be full of energy." She thanked the neighbor, took Peter by the hand, and headed home. As soon as she closed the door, she sat on the couch and let the tears come back. "Mom, why are you crying?" Peter climbed onto the couch next to her, worried. "It's nothing, sweetheart. Mom is just a little sad today." "Do you want me to tell you a joke?" Jokes make people happy. Livia smiled through her tears. I'd like that. Why was the math book sad? I don't know. Why? Because it had too many problems. Peter burst out laughing at his own joke. Livia pulled him into a tight hug. You are the best thing in my life, you know that? I know. You say that every day. He hugged her back. They stayed there together for a while, until Livia managed to compose herself. She needed to think about what to do, but first she needed to take care of Peter. Later that afternoon, someone knocked on the door. Livia wiped her face and went to answer. She was shocked to see Edward there. Edward, what are you doing here? I went to the restaurant to look for you, and Tony told me what happened, he said, his voice full of concern. Livia, I'm so sorry. This is my fault. It's not your fault. It's that witch Estella's fault. May I come in? Livia hesitated, glancing back. The apartment was small and modest, nothing like what Edward was probably used to, but he was already there. Of course, sorry. Come in. Edward stepped inside and looked around. The apartment was simple but cozy, with Peter's drawings on the walls and toys scattered on the floor. Mom, who is it? Peter came from the kitchen holding a cup of juice. Peter, this is Edward. Edward, this is my son, Peter. Hi, Peter said excitedly. You're in a wheelchair, that's cool. Can you race with it? Edward laughed. I can. Wow, I bet you win against everybody. Peter, go play in your room for a little bit. I need to talk to Edward, Livia asked. Okay. Bye, Edward, from the cool chair. The boy ran to his room, and Livia sat on the couch, motioning for Edward to sit too. I came here to make you an offer, he began. Edward, if it's borrowed money, I can't accept. It's not a loan, it's a job. Livia blinked. A job? I need a personal assistant, someone to organize my schedule, go with me to meetings and events, help with day-to-day things. The pay is good, much better than at the restaurant. Edward, you don't need to do this. I'm not doing it out of pity. I'm doing it because I need someone, and you need a job. It's a fair exchange. Livia bit her lip. It was tempting, but also frightening. I don't know anything about being a personal assistant. You'll learn. It's basically organization and common sense, and you have both. But what about Peter? I can't leave him alone. Bring him with you when you need to. My home office has plenty of space, and on days when I have important meetings, you can hire Mrs. Surratt Thompson like you always do. Livia looked down at her hands, thinking. It was an amazing opportunity, but it also put her in a vulnerable position. What if it didn't work? What if she wasn't good enough? Livia, Edward said gently, let me help you, please. She looked in his eyes and saw sincerity. It wasn't pity, it was truly a helping hand. All right, she finally said. I'll take it. But if I'm not good at it, you have to tell me, okay? You're going to be great, I'm sure. When do I start? How about Monday? That gives you the weekend to get organized. Monday is perfect. Edward smiled, relieved. Great. I'll send you the address and all the details by message. Thank you, Edward. Really, you have no idea how much this means to me. I have an idea, he said gently. Peter came running from the living room. Are you done talking? Because I want to show my drawing to Edward. I'd love to see your drawing, Edward said. Peter ran back and returned with a piece of paper full of colorful scribbles. Look, it's a dragon fighting an astronaut in space. Edward examined the drawing seriously. It's amazing. The dragon even has detailed scales. I'm really good at drawing. My teacher said so. Livia watched the two of them talking about the drawing and felt her heart tighten in a good way. Maybe things really would work out. The following Monday, Livia woke up at 6 in the morning, more nervous than ever. She chose her best clothes, black pants, and a simple white blouse, and spent half an hour trying to fix her hair in a way that looked professional. Mom, why are you wearing fancy clothes? Peter asked from the bedroom door, still in his pajamas. Because today is my first day at the new job, remember? Oh, right, at the place of the man with the cool chair. That's right, and you're staying with Mrs. Thompson today, okay? Okay, she said she's making chocolate cookies. Livia dropped Peter off at the neighbor's house and took the bus to the address Edward had sent her. When she got off and saw the huge mansion in front of her, she almost had a heart attack. Oh my goodness, he lives in a palace, she murmured to herself. She rang the doorbell and waited. Edward opened the door seconds later, already wearing a light blue dress shirt. Good morning? You're right on time, he said, smiling. Good morning, I'm always on time. Well, almost always. Okay, not always, but I try. Livia walked in and her mouth fell open. Edward, your house is gigantic. My whole apartment could fit in your living room. He laughed. It's too big for just one person, I admit. Come, let me show you where you'll be working. He led her to a spacious office with a large desk, computers, shelves full of books, and a window overlooking the garden. Wow, was all Livia could say. Your desk is right here. Edward pointed to a smaller desk next to his. I already set up your computer and left a list of your responsibilities, nothing too complicated to start with. Livia sat down and looked at the list. Organize the schedule, answer emails, make calls, file documents. It seemed simple enough. And what if I mess something up? She asked, biting her lip. You're not going to mess anything up. And if you do, we fix it. Don't worry. Easy for you to say. You don't know my history with professional things. Once I spilled coffee all over the manager's computer at the restaurant. And what happened? The computer fried completely. Tony didn't talk to me for 3 days. Edward shook his head, trying not to laugh. I promise I'll keep the coffee far from the computers. The first few hours were calm. Edward explained the scheduling system and showed her how to organize appointments. Livia wrote everything down frantically in a notebook. You don't need to write everything by hand. It's all on the computer, he pointed out. I know, but writing helps me remember. I'm more of a paper and pen person than advanced technology. Around 11 in the morning, the phone rang. Livia looked at Edward in panic. Answer it, he said, encouraging her. Just say, Mr. Smith's office, how may I help you? Livia took a deep breath and answered. Mr. Smith's office, how may I help you? Hello, I need to talk to Edward Smith about tomorrow's meeting, said a male voice on the other end. One moment, please. Livia put the call on hold and looked at Edward. It's about a meeting tomorrow. It must be Richard from the investment company. Transfer it to me. Livia transferred the call and let out the air she'd been holding. I did it. See, it wasn't that hard. The rest of the morning went by without any problems. Livia organized files, answered a few simple emails, and even managed to schedule a meeting without help. At lunchtime, Edward ordered Chinese food for both of them. They ate in the office, talking about random things. You know what's funny? Livia said, picking up a spring roll. I was terrified this morning, but this is actually nice. Much better than carrying heavy trays all day. Speaking of that, how's Peter? He's probably eating cookies until he explodes at Mrs. Thompson's house. She loves spoiling him. You said you want to go back to studying physical therapy, right? Livia nodded while chewing. Yes, but it will take time. I need to save money first. Edward stayed quiet for a moment, thoughtful. Then he said, What if you go back sooner? What do you mean? The salary I'm paying you is good. If you save properly, you could go back next semester. Livia dropped her spring roll. Edward, you're being too generous with me. I'm not being generous. I'm being fair. You're working. You're earning it. What you do with the money is your choice. She felt her eyes sting. Why are you doing all this for me? Because you deserve it, Livia. You deserve to have your opportunities back. They stayed quiet for a moment, just looking at each other. Then Livia cleared her throat and went back to eating. Well, if I really manage to go back to school, I'll have to thank that witch Estella for firing me. Edward almost choked on his pasta. What do you mean? Yeah. If she hadn't done that awful thing, I wouldn't be here now. Sometimes bad things happen to make room for good things, you know? You're amazing. You know that? Most people would just be angry. Oh, I'm still angry at her. But anger doesn't pay the bills, Livia shrugged. In the afternoon, Edward had an important video conference. Livia was in charge of taking notes and organizing the main points of the meeting. When the meeting was over, Edward looked at the notes she had taken, impressed. They were organized, clear, and complete. You did very well, he said. Really? Because I was so nervous. That man in the gray suit would not stop talking in technical terms I did not understand at all. But you wrote everything down just right anyway. Thank you. I think I finally found something I'm good at besides dropping trays of food. At 5 in the afternoon, Livia said goodbye and went to pick up Peter. When she arrived at Mrs. Thompson's house, the boy was covered in flour. What happened here? She asked, trying not to laugh. We made cookies, and I helped make the dough, and the flour exploded. Peter said excitedly. Exploded? Well, I may have thrown a little bit in the air by accident, Mrs. Thompson admitted, laughing. Livia took Peter home and gave him a bath, removing flour from impossible places. While he played in his room after dinner, she sat on the couch and thought about the day. It had been good, better than she expected. Edward was a patient and kind boss, and the work was not as hard as she had imagined. For the first time in a long time, Livia felt that things were getting better. She picked up her phone and sent a message to Edward. "Thank you for the first day. It was great." He replied almost immediately, "You were the great one. See you tomorrow." Livia smiled and put the phone away. Peter appeared at the bedroom door. "Mom, are you happy today?" "I am, sweetie." "Why?" "Because you're smiling differently, like a really big, real smile." She opened her arms and he ran to hug her. "You know why? Because things are getting better for us." "Because of Edward?" "A little, yes. I liked him. He is nice, and his chair is super cool too." "He really is very nice," Livia agreed, kissing her son's head. That night, after putting Peter to bed, Livia stayed awake thinking. She thought about college, which she might be able to go back to. She thought about the new job she was loving. And she thought about Edward, about the gentle way he treated her and Peter, about his smile that made her heart race. She shook her head, trying to push those thoughts away. She could not fall in love with her boss. That would be way too complicated. But as she closed her eyes to sleep, it was his face that appeared in her mind. And for the first time in years, Livia fell asleep with a smile on her face. 2 weeks went by, and Livia was adjusting well to the new job. She already knew Edward's routine, knew how he liked his coffee, and could tell when he was going to need a break to stretch his back. On a Thursday morning, she arrived at the office and found Edward looking at the computer with a frustrated expression. "Good morning. What happened? Did your computer insult you?" he sighed. "Worse, my physical therapist canceled all my sessions for the month. She is moving to another state." Livia put her bag on the desk. "You do physical therapy?" "I used to. I stopped about 6 months ago. I thought it was not making any difference." "Edward, physical therapy is super important, especially for someone with a spinal injury." She crossed her arms. "Why did you stop?" "Because I got tired of trying and not seeing any results," he answered, his voice tired. "How long did you do it?" "About 8 months." "Only 8 months? Edward, recovery takes time, sometimes years." "Livia, I know you studied physical therapy." "But exactly, I studied it, and I know you gave up too soon." She pulled up a chair and sat in front of him. "Look, I understand it is hard, but staying still will not help you at all." "And what do you suggest? That I keep paying a fortune to do exercises that do not work?" "I suggest you let me help you." Edward blinked. "What do you mean?" "I can do physical therapy with you. I did not finish the degree, but I learned the basics, and it is free, since you already pay me to work here." "Livia, I cannot ask you to do that." "You are not asking, I am offering." She stood up and put her hands on her hips. "And before you say no, think about it. What harm is there in trying? If it does not work, you can go back to complaining about life. But what if it works?" He looked at her for a long moment. There was determination in those green eyes, but there was also genuine care. "Why do you care so much?" he asked quietly. "Because I see you here every day complaining about back pain but doing nothing to get better. And because I know you can have a better quality of life if you do the right exercises." She shrugged. "And also because you gave me a job when I needed it the most. Let me give something back." Edward smiled despite everything. "You're stubborn, you know that?" "I hear that a lot. So do you accept or not?" "I accept. But if I complain too much, you're allowed to give up on me." "Deal. But I won't give up. I'm stubborn, remember?" She clapped her hands excitedly. "We'll start tomorrow. I need to prepare an exercise program." The next day, Livia arrived with a bag full of improvised equipment, elastic bands, small balls, and even a broom. "What are you going to do with the broom?" Edward asked, laughing. "Stretching exercises? A broom is great for helping with posture. I learned that in my second semester." She began organizing everything in an open area of the office. "Okay, let's start slowly. First, I want to see your range of motion." She spent the next hour guiding Edward through basic exercises. He complained, groaned, and made funny faces, but he followed every instruction. "This hurts." He protested when she asked him to stretch his arm in a specific way. It hurts because your muscles are weak, but it will get better, I promise. You're a torturer, you know that? I'm a physical therapist. Well, almost one, she corrected herself, laughing. Come on, 3 more repetitions. Are you the army general now? I am, and you're the soldier, so follow orders. When they finished, Edward was sweating and exhausted. Livia brought him cold water and a towel. Tomorrow we'll do it again, she said cheerfully. Tomorrow I won't be able to move because of the pain. Yes, you will, and later you'll thank me. I really doubt that. But the next day, despite the complaints, Edward was ready for the next session, and the day after that, and the next one. 2 weeks later, on a Friday afternoon, Livia had to bring Peter to work because Mrs. Thompson had a medical appointment. Mom, this house is huge, Peter yelled as soon as they walked in. It's like a castle. It is big, sweetheart, but you need to stay quiet while Mommy works, okay? Okay. Edward was in the office when they heard fast footsteps. Peter ran in and stopped when he saw the wheelchair. Hi, Edward. Do you remember me? Of course I remember. How are you, Peter? Good. Mommy said you live in a castle. Is there a dragon here? Edward laughed out loud. Unfortunately, no, but I have video games. Do you like video games? Peter's eyes lit up. Yes. Peter, Edward is working, Livia began. It's okay. I already finished what I had to do today. Edward looked at Peter. Do you want to see my collection? I do. Edward took Peter to the game room, and Livia followed. When he opened the door and Peter saw the amount of video games, consoles, and tech toys, the boy almost fainted from happiness. This place is paradise, he shouted. You can play all you want, Edward said. For the rest of the afternoon, Livia worked while she heard Peter's and Edward's laughter coming from the next room. Every now and then she checked on them, and she always found the two completely focused on some game. Watch out for that enemy, Peter shouted. I see it. Grab that power-up over there. Got it. Now shoot. Livia shook her head, smiling. Seeing Edward interacting so naturally with Peter warmed her heart in a way she didn't expect. When 6 o'clock came, she went to get them. Peter, we need to go. Already? But we were almost finishing the level. We can continue another day, Edward said. You can come back any time you want. Really? You're the best. On the way home, Peter wouldn't stop talking. Mom, Edward is really cool. He has all the games I always wanted. And he let me win. He let you win? Well, I think he let me. Or maybe I'm really good, Peter considered seriously. It's definitely the second option, Livia said, laughing. And Mom, Edward likes you. Livia almost hit the brakes. What? He likes you. He smiles differently when he talks about you, like the way the prince smiles at the princess in the cartoons. Peter, you're imagining things. I'm not. And you like him too. You get all silly when he talks to you. I do not get silly. Yes, you do. The other day you were so silly that you put salt in the coffee instead of sugar. Livia had no answer for that because it was true. That had happened exactly the week before. Look, Edward is my boss. That's all, she said, more to convince herself than her son. If you say so, Peter replied, but his tone made it clear he didn't believe it at all. That night, after putting Peter to bed, Livia kept thinking about the conversation. Was it really that obvious that she liked Edward? And did he actually like her too? She shook her head, trying to push those thoughts away. She couldn't get carried away. Edward was rich, successful, handsome. She was an unemployed waitress with a child to raise. It didn't make sense. But as she lay down in bed and closed her eyes, she couldn't stop herself from smiling at the memory of how Edward had played with Peter, with so much patience and kindness. Maybe Peter was right. Maybe she really was acting foolish. And the scariest part? She didn't mind at all. The next morning, Livia was organizing documents when Edward arrived for his physical therapy session with a strange look on his face. Everything okay? She asked. Yes, I just was thinking about something Peter said yesterday. Livia felt her heart race. Oh, really? What did he say? That I have all the games he always wanted. It made me think that maybe I buy too many things to make up for other areas of my life. She relaxed. At least it wasn't about the he likes you part. You don't have to make up for anything. Peter loved spending the afternoon with you. I loved it too. It's been a long time since I had that much fun, Edward smiled. He's an amazing kid, Livia. You're doing a wonderful job. Thank you. I do what I can. She grabbed the elastic bands. Well, enough talking. Time to suffer. You love torturing me, don't you? I do. It's the best part of my day, she said, laughing. They started the exercises. Edward was more flexible than in the first sessions, able to do movements that had been impossible before. Look at that. You managed to stretch your arm this far without complaining. Livia cheered. Only because I know that if I complain, you'll make me repeat it 10 times. You know me well. In the middle of the session, while Edward was doing a stretch lying on the mat, there was a comfortable moment of silence. Then he asked, Livia, can I ask you a personal question? You can, but I reserve the right not to answer. Fair. Peter's father, do you still have contact with him? Livia paused what she was doing. No, he left when he found out I was pregnant. Never came back. I'm sorry. You don't have to be. It was better that way. If he didn't want to be present, better that he left early than stayed and made Peter unhappy, she shrugged. But I won't lie, it was hard in the beginning. Finding out I was pregnant, watching him leave, having to drop out of college, sometimes I wonder how things would be if they had turned out differently. Do you regret it? Having Peter? Never. He's the best thing that ever happened to me. But sometimes I regret trusting the wrong person. She helped Edward sit up. And you? Were you ever married? Almost. I was engaged when I had the accident. What happened? Edward stayed quiet for so long that Livia thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he said, she couldn't handle the wheelchair. She said she still loved me, but that it wasn't what she signed up for when she accepted the proposal. What a terrible person, Livia exclaimed without thinking. I can't blame her completely. It was a drastic change. Edward, no. She is terrible. When you love someone, you stay by their side during the hard times. That's what love is for. Livia sat next to him on the mat. She didn't deserve you. He looked at her, surprised by her intensity. Thank you for saying that. I'm just telling the truth. You're amazing, Edward. Anyone would be lucky to be with you, wheelchair or not. They stared at each other for a moment, far too long to be just friendly. Livia felt her cheeks warm and stood up quickly. Well, let's keep going before you cool down. The rest of the session passed with both of them a little quieter than usual, but not in an uncomfortable way. That afternoon, Edward had an important meeting at the company. Livia went with him to take notes. During the car ride, she noticed he was nervous. Hey, everything is going to be fine, she said, lightly touching his arm. It's a crucial meeting. If it goes wrong, we could lose a $5 million contract. Then it's not going to go wrong. You're amazing at what you do. Those guys are going to love you. Edward smiled. How are you always so positive? Practical. And also because someone has to balance out your pessimistic side, she winked. The meeting was a success. Edward presented the project with confidence, and the investors loved it. When they walked out of the building, he was glowing. We did it, he said, smiling from ear to ear. I knew it. I told you you were amazing. I wouldn't have done it without your organized notes and your irritating optimism. Irritating? Hey, she gave him a playful slap on the shoulder. They stopped at a restaurant to celebrate. While they ate, they talked about everything and nothing at the same time. Livia told more funny stories about Peter, and Edward talked about his plans to expand the company. You know what's funny? Livia said, eating a piece of chocolate cake. A month ago, I was serving tables at Bella Vista without knowing how I was going to pay the next month's bills. And now I'm here, working at a job I love, helping someone with physical therapy, and even thinking about going back to school. It feels unreal. You deserve all of that and more. You've said that before, but really why? Why do you care so much about me? Edward set his fork on the table and looked straight into her eyes. Because you make me feel alive again. 3 years ago, I was just existing, going through the days without truly living. But ever since I met you, I laugh again. I have reasons to wake up in the morning besides work. You brought color to a world that had turned black and white. Livia felt her eyes burn. Edward, sorry if I'm being too direct, but it's the truth. She wiped away a tear that had escaped. You changed my life too, not just with the job, but with the way you treat me. The way you treat Peter. It's been a long time since I felt so valued. They stayed there, just looking at each other across the table, with so many unspoken things floating in the air between them. The moment was interrupted by Livia's phone ringing. It was Mrs. Thompson. Hello? Livia, dear, I'm sorry to bother you. Peter has a fever. It's nothing serious, but I think you should come pick him up. I'll be right there. Thank you for letting me know. She hung up and looked at Edward, worried. Peter has a fever. I need to get him. Let's go. He was already picking up his wallet to pay the bill. They went straight to Mrs. Thompson's house. Peter was on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, his little face red. Mom, he said in a weak voice. Hi, my love. You're not feeling well? My throat hurts. Livia touched his forehead. It was warm. Let's go home and take some medicine, okay? Edward helped carry Peter's things to the car. During the ride, Peter fell asleep in the back seat. When they reached Livia's building, Edward insisted on helping her carry Peter upstairs. She didn't have the strength to refuse. They put Peter in bed, and Livia gave him fever medicine. The boy fell asleep almost instantly. Thank you for your help, she said to Edward when they returned to the living room. You're welcome. Do you want me to stay, in case you need anything? No, it's okay. Everything will be fine. It's just a common fever. Are you sure? I'm sure. But thank you for offering. She walked him to the door. Edward hesitated before leaving. Livia, about what we talked about at the restaurant. I know, she said softly. I felt the same way. He smiled, a small but genuine smile. Good night, then. Good night, Edward. After he left, Livia leaned against the closed door and let out a long sigh. Her heart was racing and her mind was confused, but one thing was certain. Something had changed between them that night. And she wasn't sure she was ready to deal with it. But at the same time, she couldn't imagine going back. The next day, Livia stayed home taking care of Peter. His fever had passed during the night, but he was still weak and needed rest. Mom, can I play video games? Peter asked from the bed, already looking much better. You can, but only for 1 hour. You need to rest. 1 hour isn't enough rest? Livia laughed. Rest is sleeping, not fighting monsters on the screen. But fighting monsters is tiring too. It takes a lot of concentration. You're impossible, you know that? Livia's phone rang. It was Edward. Hello? Hi, how's Peter? Much better. The fever is gone. He's already negotiating video game time, so I think he's recovering. Edward laughed on the other end. I'm glad to hear that. Listen, you don't need to come to work today. Stay home with him. But what about your meetings? I'll manage. Really, don't worry. Thank you, Edward. You're welcome. Oh, and Livia? Yes. Well, we need to talk about yesterday. Livia's heart sped up. I know. We can talk tomorrow? Of course. Tomorrow it is. See you tomorrow. She hung up and stared at the phone, lost in thought. Peter appeared at the bedroom door. Was that Edward? It was. You've got that silly face again. Peter, it's true. You get all smiley with shiny eyes when you talk to him. The boy mimicked an exaggerated, dramatic expression. I do not make that face. Yes, you do. And you know what else? I think you should marry him. Livia almost choked. Peter, we barely know each other. You do know each other. You work with him every day. You help him with physical therapy. You laugh at his jokes. You stare at him when you think no one is looking. You're seeing way too much for a 4-year-old. I'm almost 5. And I know when two people like each other. I saw it in a movie. Livia sat beside her son on the bed. Look, even if I like Edward, and I'm not saying I do, things aren't that simple. Why not? Because he's my boss. Because he's rich and we're not. Because he can have any woman he wants. But he wants you. I saw the way he looks at you, Mom. It's the same way you look at him. When did you get so wise? I always was. You just never noticed, Peter said with a shrug and went back to his room. Livia stayed there, thinking about her son's words. Was it really that obvious? The next morning, she arrived at work more nervous than on her first day. Edward was in the office, working on his computer. Good morning, she said, trying to sound natural. Good morning. How's Peter? Great. He's with Mrs. Thompson. He's already back to his usual annoying self. Edward smiled. Good. Look, about that conversation. Before he could continue, there was a noise at the front door. Quick footsteps approached, and a woman burst into the office like a whirlwind. She looked about 60, with short gray hair and bright blue eyes identical to Edward's. She wore a colorful floral dress and bright pink sneakers. Edward Michael Smith, are you not answering your mother's phone calls anymore? Edward closed his eyes, as if asking the universe for patience. Hi, Mom. Don't hi, Mom, me. I've been calling you for 3 days. Sorry, I've been busy. The woman finally noticed Livia. And who is this lovely young lady? Mom, this is Livia, my personal assistant. Livia, this is my mother, Rosalind. Nice to meet you, Mrs. Smith, Livia said, holding out her hand. Rosalind ignored the hand and pulled Livia into a tight hug. Call me Rosalind, dear, and let me take a good look at you. She held Livia by the shoulders and examined her from head to toe. Then she turned to Edward with a huge smile. Personal assistant? Really? Son, when did you hire a personal assistant and forget to tell me? A few weeks ago. A few weeks ago? Rosalind put her hands on her hips. Edward, you're hiding things from me. I don't like it. I'm not hiding anything, Mom. I just didn't think it was necessary to call you to tell you I hired an assistant. Rosalind looked between the two of them with sharp eyes. And you're doing physical therapy again, too? I saw the equipment in the corner. Yes, Livia is helping me. Oh, she is? Rosalind's smile grew even bigger. How interesting. Very, very interesting. Livia was starting to understand where Edward got his strong personality. Mom, why are you here? Edward asked, clearly wanting to change the subject. Because you're not answering me, and because I'm worried. You've been so grumpy these last few years, always alone in this huge house, refusing every date I arranged. Mom, please. But now, Rosalind continued, as if he hadn't said anything, now you're different. Lighter. Even your posture is better, and I bet it has something to do with a certain very pretty personal assistant. Mom. Livia tried not to laugh at Edward's mortified expression. What? I'm just telling the truth. Rosalind winked at Livia. My son may be a little stubborn, but he's a good man, and it's time for him to stop being alone. Mom, you're embarrassing Livia. Nonsense. Women appreciate honesty, Rosalind said, sitting in a chair without being invited. So Livia, tell me about yourself. Are you married? Do you have kids? Mom. Edward, let the young lady answer. I have the right to know the people who work for my son. Livia decided she liked Rosalind. I have a son, Peter. He's 4. Oh, wonderful. I love children. Edward was so cute when he was little. He had these big cheeks everyone wanted to pinch. Mom, please stop. He also had that messy hair and would run around the house without a shirt. Now you're making things up. I am not. You hated wearing shirts. Your grandmother said you were going to turn into a wild boy. Livia was enjoying every second of it. Seeing Edward embarrassed was hilarious. Rosalind, would you like some coffee? She offered. I'd love some, dear. Thank you. Livia went to the kitchen to make coffee, and Rosalind followed her, leaving Edward alone in the office. So, Rosalind said as soon as they stepped into the kitchen. You and my son? We're just boss and employee, Livia said quickly. Dear, I wasn't born yesterday. I saw how you both looked at each other when I walked in. And I saw how his face lit up when you spoke. Livia felt her cheeks warm. It's complicated. Love always is. But you know what's even harder? Letting happiness slip away out of fear. Rosalind gently touched her arm. Edward spent 3 years locked inside that sadness after the accident. I watched my son disappear little by little. But now, for the first time in a long time, I see hope in his eyes, and I have the feeling you have a lot to do with that. I don't know if... You don't have to know anything right now. Just don't run away from what you feel, all right? Livia nodded, not sure what to say. They went back to the office with the coffee. Rosalind stayed for another hour, telling embarrassing stories about Edward as a child and asking questions about Peter. I want to meet that little grandson, she said. Mom, you can't call her son a little grandson. You just met her. Why not? I already decided I like her. And if I like her son too, so he's my little grandson. Edward rubbed his face with his hands. You're impossible. I heard that somewhere today, Livia murmured, remembering her conversation with Peter. When Rosalind finally left, promising to come back soon, Edward let out a relieved sigh. Sorry about that. My mom is intense. She's wonderful, Livia said sincerely. You can tell she loves you very much. Sometimes she loves too much, he smiled. But yes, she's special. They were quiet for a moment. Then Edward said, about that conversation we need to have. Can we leave it for later? Livia interrupted. I think we've had enough emotion for today. He agreed, but both knew they couldn't avoid it forever. In the following days, Edward and Livia kept a normal work routine, but there was a tension in the air neither of them knew how to handle. They talked, laughed, did physical therapy, but carefully avoided the subject hanging between them. One Friday afternoon, almost at the end of the day, Livia walked into the office to grab some documents and found Edward looking at a photo with teary eyes. "Edward?" she said softly. He quickly hid the photo in the drawer and wiped his eyes. "Sorry, I was just—" "Hey, you don't have to apologize," she said, walking closer and sitting in the chair beside him. "What happened?" "Nothing. I just was remembering a few things." "What things?" Edward stayed silent for so long that Livia thought he wouldn't answer. Then he opened the drawer again and took out the photo. It was him with a young man who looked about 20, both smiling in some park. "This is my brother Daniel," he said, his voice heavy. "I didn't know you had a brother." "I did," Edward corrected, and Livia felt her heart tighten. He was in the car with me when I had the accident, 3 years ago." Livia covered her mouth, understanding immediately. "Edward." "I was driving. It was a rainy night, and I was distracted, talking on the phone about some stupid business thing I don't even remember anymore. I lost control of the car." His voice shook. "The car flipped. I survived, but Daniel—" The tears started falling freely now. He was 22, Livia. He had just graduated from college. He had his whole life ahead of him, and because of me, because of my distraction, Livia didn't think twice. She stood up and hugged Edward tightly, letting him cry on her shoulder. "It wasn't your fault," she whispered. "It was an accident. But I was driving. I was distracted. If I had paid attention—" "Edward, stop. Don't do that to yourself." She held his face in both hands, making him look at her. "Accidents happen. You didn't want that to happen. You can't carry this guilt forever." "How can I not? He was my younger brother. I was supposed to protect him. And you did your best. Nobody leaves home expecting to have an accident." Livia wiped his tears with her thumbs. "Daniel wouldn't want you to blame yourself like this. He wouldn't want you to stop living because of it. You don't understand. My mom lost a son because of me. My parents, they'll never forgive me completely." "Your parents forgave you, Edward. Your mom was here the other day, worried about you, wanting to see you happy. She loves you. But I still see it in her eyes. The pain, the loss." "Of course you see it. She lost a son, but she doesn't blame you for it, and you need to stop blaming yourself too." Edward rested his forehead against hers, closing his eyes. "It's so hard. I know, but you're not alone in this. Not anymore." They stayed like that for a long moment, just holding on to each other. Then Edward pulled back slightly, still holding Livia's hands. "Thank you," he said, "for listening, for not judging me. I'll never judge you, and I'll always listen." He looked into her eyes with an intensity that made Livia's heart race. "Livia, I need to tell you something." "What? I'm in love with you." The world stopped. Livia felt as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. "Edward, I know it's complicated. I know I'm your boss, and that can make everything harder. But I can't pretend anymore. You make me feel things I thought I would never feel again. You make me want to be a better person. You make me want to try again." Livia didn't know what to say. Every word felt stuck in her throat. "You don't need to say anything now," Edward continued. "I just needed you to know, because I couldn't keep it inside anymore." Before Livia could process her answer, they heard fast footsteps. She stepped away from Edward quickly, feeling her cheeks burn. It was just the doorbell. Edward went to answer it while Livia tried to control her breathing and her thoughts. When he came back, he was holding an envelope. "I forgot I ordered this," he said, opening it. They were tickets for a charity event the next Saturday. "Are you going?" Livia asked, grateful for the distraction. "I have to go. It's important for business," he hesitated. Would you like to go with me? Not as an assistant, as my date." Livia bit her lip. Her heart said yes, but her head listed all the reasons to say no. "Edward, I don't know if that's a good idea. Please. I know I just put you in a difficult position with what I said, but I would love to have you by my side." How could she refuse those eyes? "Okay, I'll go." His smile was like the sunrise. "Really?" "Really, but only because you need someone to keep you company at those boring events." "They're really boring," he agreed, still smiling. When Livia left work that afternoon, her mind was a storm. Edward was in love with her. He had said it out loud. And her? Well, she knew exactly how she felt, but she was too scared to admit it. On the way to pick up Peter, she thought about everything that had happened in the last few weeks. How her life had changed completely since that night at the restaurant when she defended a stranger from a horrible woman. Peter noticed something was different the moment he saw her. Did something happen? Why? You look like someone who just won the lottery but also lost the ticket. Livia laughed despite everything. When are you going to stop being so smart? Never. It's my superpower. He jumped into the car seat. Was it because of Edward? Maybe. Did he say he loves you? Livia almost hit the brakes. How did you? I'm smart, remember? And you two are terrible at hiding things. Peter shook his head like a tiny adult. So did he say it or not? He did, she admitted. And did you say it back? No. Why not? Because it's complicated, Peter. Adults always say that. It's complicated. You know what I think? I think you all make things complicated. It's simple. He likes you, you like him. That's it. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. You're just scared. Livia looked at her son through the rearview mirror. When had he gotten so wise? Maybe you're right. I'm always right, he said confidently. So are you going to tell him you like him too? I don't know. Maybe one day. You should do it soon. Otherwise another woman will show up and take him from you. Peter. What? I'm just telling the truth. Edward is nice, rich, and has all those video games. Any woman would want him. Livia couldn't help but laugh. You're more worried about the video games than anything else. Video games are important, but you're important too. And I like Edward. He's nice to me, and he makes you happy. So I think you should give him a chance. That night, after putting Peter to bed, Livia stayed awake thinking. Peter was right. Edward made her happy. Happier than she had been in a long time. And she was in love with him too, even if she was afraid to admit it. But what if it didn't work? What if she ruined everything? What if... She stopped the thoughts. She was doing exactly what Peter had said, complicating things. Maybe it was time to simplify, to follow her heart instead of her head. She grabbed her phone and typed a message to Edward. I'm looking forward to the event on Saturday. Good night. The reply came immediately. Me too. Good night, Livia. She smiled and hugged her pillow. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she was willing to find out. The next day, during the physical therapy session, there was a different energy in the air. Edward was more focused on the exercises, but Livia noticed the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. 5 more repetitions, she instructed, holding the elastic band. You love torturing me. He complained, but he was smiling. Torture is when you don't see results. But look, you're reaching much farther than you did a month ago. Edward stopped and looked at his own arm, surprised. That's true. Of course it is. I'm great at what I do, Livia joked. Now let's move on to the leg strengthening exercises. As they worked, Livia guided Edward through specific movements to build muscle. He was focused, following each instruction seriously. You know, he said as he took a break, you're a natural physical therapist. You really should go back to school. I'm already saving money. With the salary you pay me, I think I can go back next semester. I'm glad to hear that. There was a comfortable pause. Then Livia asked, And you? How are you feeling after yesterday? Edward knew she was talking about the conversation about Daniel. Better, actually. It's been a long time since I talked about him with anyone. My parents avoid the subject, and I always thought it was easier to keep everything inside. It's not easier. It just feels like it is. You're right, he agreed. Thank you for listening, and for not judging me. I'll never judge you, Edward. He took her hand, interlacing their fingers. About what I said yesterday. Before he could continue, there was a strange sound. Edward tried to adjust himself on the mat and suddenly managed to move his leg in a way he hadn't in months. They both froze. Did you see that? Livia whispered, almost in disbelief. I felt it. I felt my leg move. Try again, slowly. Edward focused, and the leg moved again. Just a little, but it moved. Tears began to run down his face, but this time they were tears of joy. Livia, it's working. The physical therapy is working. She covered her mouth with both hands, crying as well. I knew it. I knew you could do it. They spent the next hour testing the movements, documenting every bit of progress. Edward was more excited than Livia had ever seen. When they finished, he pulled Livia into a tight hug. Thank you. Thank you so much. You have no idea what this means to me. I do, she said, hugging him back. And this is just the beginning. You're going to keep getting better. They pulled apart slightly, but Edward was still holding her arms. They were so close that Livia could feel his breath. Her eyes fell to his lips, and she saw him do the same. The moment was there, perfect and inevitable. Livia closed her eyes and tilted her head, and then their lips met. The kiss was soft at first, hesitant, as if both were testing the waters. But then Edward deepened the kiss, and Livia felt like she was floating. It was everything she had imagined and more. When they finally pulled apart, they were both out of breath. "Sorry," Livia said automatically, bringing her hand to her mouth. "I shouldn't have." "Don't apologize," Edward said, gently holding her face. "Please don't apologize. But it's just, this complicates everything." "Or it simplifies it," he said, echoing Peter's words. "Livia, I love you," and that kiss was perfect. She wanted to say she loved him too. The words were right there, but fear held her back. "Edward, I need some time to process all of this." He nodded, clearly disappointed but understanding. "All right, I get it." The rest of the day passed in a strange haze. Livia felt confused, happy, scared, everything at once. She had kissed Edward, and she had liked it. A lot. When she left at the end of her shift, he walked her to the door. "We're still going to the event tomorrow?" he asked. "We are," she confirmed. "I promised, didn't I?" "Thank you. And Livia?" "Yes. No matter what you decide, I'll respect it. But I want you to know that for me, that kiss changed everything." That night, Livia couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned, replaying the kiss over and over. The softness of his lips, the way he held her face, the feeling of being exactly where she was meant to be. Peter found her in the kitchen at 2 a.m, eating ice cream straight from the tub. "Can't sleep?" he asked, rubbing his eyes. "Sorry, sweetheart, did I wake you?" "No. I had a weird dream about dinosaurs wearing pajamas." He sat beside her. "What happened?" Livia hesitated, but then decided Peter deserved to know. "I kissed Edward today." Peter's eyes went wide. "Really? And was it nice?" "It was. Incredible." "So what's the problem?" "I'm scared, Peter. What if it doesn't work? What if I ruin everything? This job is important for us. And more than that, Edward is important. I don't want to lose him." "Mom," Peter put his little hand on hers. "You always tell me to be brave, to try new things even when I'm scared. I think it's time for you to follow your own advice." Livia looked at her 4-year-old son, who talked like a 40-year-old, and smiled through her tears. "When did you get so smart?" "I always was. You just never noticed," he repeated the line he had said before. "Now come on, let's go back to bed. Tomorrow is the fancy event and you need to look beautiful." "You're right. I always am." Livia put Peter back in bed and finally managed to fall asleep, hugging her pillow with a smile on her face. Tomorrow would be an important day. And for the first time, instead of fear, she felt excitement. She had kissed Edward. And she didn't regret it at all. The next day, Livia spent the entire morning panicking while trying to decide what to wear. She had only 2 dresses in her closet, and neither seemed right for a fancy charity event. "Peter, help me out here. Which one of these is less ugly?" She held up the 2 dresses. "The red one." "Red is the color of love," he said with all the wisdom of his almost 5 years. "Since when do you know about the color of love?" "I saw it in a cartoon. The princess always wears red when she's going to meet the prince." Livia laughed and chose the simple red dress. It was nothing compared to what the other women would probably wear, but it was the best she had. She left Peter with Mrs. Thompson, who was thrilled to know it was for a date with Edward. "Finally, I knew you two would end up together," she said, winking. When Edward arrived to pick her up at 7 in the evening, Livia almost fainted. He looked handsome in an elegant black suit, his hair perfectly styled. "You look beautiful," he said the moment he saw her, his eyes bright. "You look, too. I mean handsome, not beautiful." "Well, you are beautiful too, but not in the feminine sense," she was babbling nervously. "Wow, I'm going to stop talking now." Edward laughed. "You're adorable when you're nervous." In the car on the way to the event, Livia kept fussing with her dress. "I'm sure I'm going to do something silly, like spill wine on someone important or trip on the carpet." "You'll do perfectly fine. And if you spill wine, we'll laugh about it together." The event hall was breathtaking. Huge chandeliers, tables decorated with expensive flowers, elegant people everywhere. Livia felt completely out of place. Edward noticed her discomfort and held her hand. "Hey, you belong here just as much as anyone else." "No, I don't. Look at me and look at these people. They probably spend more on shoes than I spend on food in a year. So what? You're worth more than all these people put together. During dinner, Livia tried to behave, but it was hard not to make funny comments about everything. When they served a tiny appetizer on a huge plate, she whispered to Edward, "I think they forgot the rest of the food." He had to hold back his laughter. The woman sitting next to them looked at them disapprovingly, which only made the two of them laugh more. After dinner, there were endless speeches about the charity organization. Livia tried to pay attention, but she was more focused on Edward by her side, on the way he occasionally touched her hand under the table. When they were finally allowed to dance, Edward invited her. Livia hesitated, looking at the wheelchair. "I don't know how we're going to." "Trust me," he said, extending his hand. They went to the dance floor. Edward pulled her close, and she wrapped her arms around his neck while he held her by the waist. It wasn't a traditional dance, but it worked perfectly for them. "See? Perfect," he murmured. "You always find a way to make things work." "I learned that from you." As they danced, Livia felt all her defenses fall away. There, in Edward's arms, everything made sense. It didn't matter that he was rich and she wasn't. It didn't matter that he was her boss. Nothing mattered except that moment. "Edward," she said softly. "Yes? I love you too." He stopped moving and looked into her eyes. "What?" "I love you. I'm scared to admit it because it's new and frightening, and I don't know how it's going to turn out. But I love you. I've loved you since that day at the restaurant when you smiled at me after I defended you. I love you for the way you treat Peter. I love you for making me feel valued. I just love you." Edward pulled her face close and kissed her right there, in the middle of the dance floor, with all those fancy people watching. And Livia didn't care one bit. When they pulled away, they were both smiling like fools. "Marry me," Edward said suddenly. Livia blinked. "What? Marry me? I know it's fast and crazy, but I'm sure you're the person I want by my side. You and Peter. You two are my family now." "Edward, are you out of your mind?" "Completely. Crazy about you," he smiled. "So, will you marry me, or do I need to beg here in front of everybody?" Livia looked at the man who had completely changed her life. 6 weeks ago, she was waiting tables without knowing how she would pay her bills. Now she was standing there, being asked to marry the most incredible man she had ever met. "Yes," she said, tears falling. "Yes, I'll marry you." Edward pulled her into another kiss, and this time the people around them applauded. When they pulled apart, Rosalind appeared out of nowhere. "Finally! I thought you two would never admit it," she shouted, pulling both of them into a hug. "I knew it. I knew it from the first day I saw you together." "Mom, what are you doing here?" Edward asked, surprised. "You think I would miss my son's proposal? You called me yesterday and told me everything," she said with a wink. "And now I officially have a daughter-in-law and a grandson? Peter is going to be so happy." Livia laughed through her tears. All of it was surreal and perfect at the same time. In the months that followed, a lot changed. Edward continued improving with physical therapy, gaining more movement in his legs every week. Livia went back to college, determined to finish her physical therapy degree. Peter was thrilled at the idea of having Edward as a father. And on a spring morning, 6 months after that first meeting at the restaurant, Edward surprised everyone. During his therapy session with Livia, Peter, and Rosalind present, he stood up from his wheelchair. His legs trembled, but he stood. He took one step, then another. They were small and shaky steps, but they were steps. "You did it!" Livia shouted, running to hug him. "I knew you could." Peter jumped with excitement. "You're walking, just like in a movie." Rosalind cried with joy. My son is walking." Edward looked at Livia with tears in his eyes. "Thank you for everything, for never giving up on me. Thank you for showing up in my life when I needed it most." On the wedding day, 3 months later, Edward walked down the aisle with only a cane for support. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And progress was all that mattered. When Livia walked in, beautiful in a simple but elegant white dress, with Peter beside her carrying the rings, Edward felt like his heart would burst with happiness. "Are you ready?" she asked when she reached the altar. "To spend the rest of my life with you?" "More than ready." They exchanged vows, laughed, cried, and sealed their love with a kiss that made everyone applaud. At the reception, Peter danced with Grandma Rosalind, who kept calling him her beautiful grandson. Livia and Edward danced together, him standing, holding the woman who had completely changed his life. "Who would have thought that defending a stranger in a restaurant would bring me here?" Livia said, resting her head on his shoulder. "Best decision you ever made." "I agree completely." And as they danced under the lights, surrounded by people who loved them, Livia and Edward knew this was only the beginning of a life together, full of love, laughter, therapy, Peter, Rosalind, and all the adventures still to come. Because sometimes the best stories start in the most unexpected places. And sometimes standing up for someone can change two lives forever. What did you think of Livia and Edward's story? Leave your opinion in the comments. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give? Subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell to follow all our stories and enjoy watching more emotional stories by clicking here on the final screen.